Well, he's back, and you can connect with him. We are talking about former President Donald Trump. This week, he launched an official website, which is essentially a platform for his supporters to stay in touch. 45office.com will also be used to showcase his time in office. Once again, that is 45office.com. The former president is also expected to launch his own social media platform within 2 to 3 months.
Cover today. Let's go to Mike Garofalo. Mike.
Greg, so how healthy is Joe Biden? Many Americans are likely wondering about that after his not-so-stellar performance during the first press conference of his presidency last week, and after he stumbled 3 times as he climbed the stairs recently to board Air Force One. Now, according to his press secretary, Jen Psaki, the White House is committed to releasing a comprehensive report on Joe Biden's health in the near future. She wouldn't commit to an exact date, but Psaki did say she would find out when the 78-year-old is due to go back to the doctor. The White House has repeatedly denied that Joe Biden is facing any serious health issues.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Okay, let me ask you another question. In January, we started hearing about then President Trump's cognitive ability and everything with the 25th Amendment. Now we're starting to hear things about Joe Biden and his health. Is that a thing we should be concerned with?
I don't think it is at this point. I don't think that's going to be an issue. Looking at the White House report, it's always going to come out looking good for any president. You just don't, unless you've been assassinated like JFK, you're going to get a pretty good report publicly. So as long as the people are still willing to follow that, and at this point there's going to be other people taking the load, whether it be the vice president or the Speaker of the House or whatever, there's no way they're going to have him look like he's incompetent. And there's no way that publicly you're going to know that they're going to look at the 25th Amendment, because that creates a crisis in the minds of the people. That causes people to turn to the other party or the other options. And I just don't think you're going to see that. So while we may talk about that as an issue, I don't think it's going to get to be a real issue in the minds of most people unless something really dramatic happens, like a stroke or a heart attack or something else.
And what's become a theme of the Biden administration, this president and his staff have decided to roll back another Trump policy, and they are releasing migrant families into the U.S. instead of sending them back to Mexico. According to data provided by the U.S. Border Patrol, agents are now releasing the vast majority, upwards of 85% of families that are caught trying to cross the border illegally into the United States. The Biden administration's decision to move away from sending families back across the border is centered on the COVID-19 emergency and a measure called Title 42.
All right, I want to bring in constitutional attorney and Victory News contributor KrisAnne Hall. KrisAnne, we're seeing all of this around the country with what's going on the border. And I know some people are saying you guys are making too much out of this, but actually every state has now become a border state as a result of this humanitarian crisis. Your thoughts on what we're seeing now?
You know, there is nothing to a border if you cannot actually enforce it. We delegated to the federal government the authority to create the uniform rule of naturalization, the immigration process. They have created those rules. They are choosing not to enforce those rules. Those rules created for the security of the people, the integrity of the union, for the liberties of the people of the nation. And this is where the states have to step up. We've got to stop talking about this, and we need more states like South Carolina to send aid to the border states. We need an interstate compact of agreement between the states, which is authorized by Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution, because this is an imminent danger. This is something that we can do without the consent of Congress. It's absolutely necessary. It's absolutely vital to the security, the health, and the rights of the people.
Listen, it's a danger. We are a nation of laws, and I'm a Christian. I am not against those people. Listen, if I were in one of those countries and had the opportunity to bring my family to the United States, I would do it. I mean, we would want to get them here. But we say that there's a way to do that. We still got to keep our compassion. But what I don't like seeing, KrisAnne, I know you feel the same way, when we look into these facilities, this is not healthy to the children. The trafficking, the illegal cartels that are making millions of dollars on these poor people. Your thought?
You know, if a private person, a private business treated people like this in utter and complete disregard for the law, the government would righteously come after any private business, any private person for this. How is it that federal laws are created for us, but not for the federal government? A law for thee, but not for me, is what I see. And that is a very, very disturbing trend in this administration. To say that the people who make the laws are above the laws is to declare that America is no longer a representative government. You cannot be above the laws you create and still claim to represent the people you are making the laws on behalf of.
We've heard about the drug smugglers and the human smugglers. Well, you're now going to see heartbreaking video of them in action. This video was released on Wednesday by U.S. authorities. Now, it shows two Ecuadorian children being abandoned by smugglers after they were dropped over a 14-foot-high barrier along the U.S.-Mexico border. Border Patrol agents found the toddler and her 5-year-old sister. Now, the kids were taken to a nearby Border Patrol station for a medical evaluation. The chief patrol agent in the El Paso sector, which includes parts of Texas and New Mexico, said agents using special cameras spotted a person straddling the barrier near Santa Teresa, New Mexico. The video shows the person lowering the children one at a time before letting them drop to the ground below. Both children stood up as two people fled on the other side of that border wall. Greg, I'm going to send it back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. It is heartbreaking to watch that and to know that that's happening every single day. Okay, Mark, I want to bring you in on what we saw. You were coming on the air with us before we went live today, and you saw what was going down right there behind Tim in Zavala County. That's something you experience in the state of Arizona on a daily basis as well, as we talk to sheriffs there. Your thoughts?
Yes, sir. This just points out, it highlights the irresponsible nature of what the Biden administration has done. They've created not only a health care issue, but now we have a traffic violation issue that is costing people lives. This is on their heads. This is on the Democrat leadership in the president's office and in Congress, quite frankly. They've not dealt with, as long as they've been in control, they have not dealt with immigration policy. Now, I have it on fairly good information that the leader of the Senate has said, oh, we're never going to do that because it would interrupt our fundraising. Until Americans stop giving politicians who make promises and don't deliver, we're always going to have problems like this. So it's no surprise when you see coyotes throwing children over the wall, when you see kids in cages, as much as the propaganda media wants to try and deny that this is going on, Americans have woken up and they see what's happening. Kids in cages, no. They need to be with their parents. They need to go back to wherever their parents are, repatriate them in their country of origin. And if they want to immigrate to the United States, go through the process, but don't get in the back of a pickup truck and take your life into somebody else and put your life into somebody else's hands who has absolutely no motive but profit to get you someplace. Yeah. That's going to end up in debt.
That's so true. Thank you for that. I remember during the primaries, Kamala Harris, a candidate for president at that time, said that her first thing she's going to do is shut down all of those facilities that, thanks to Ted Cruz, we got to see. And they're still open. Matter of fact, a new one opened here in Texas, I think, just today. Mike, I want to pitch it back to you.
Serious going on down here. I am in Del Rio here on this Good Friday. Last night here in Del Rio, there was a border symposium hosted by Frank Lopez, who, of course, we had on the program on Wednesday. He had several guest speakers there. We caught up with some of those speakers last night, and we asked them, is what we're witnessing right now a crisis? Here's what they had to say. Tell me, in your estimation, is what we're witnessing right now a crisis on our border?
Absolutely. It's unbelievable. How they can call that compassion, I don't know. There's just so much more suffering going on than before, and it's very bad policy.
It was working under the Trump administration, and then under the Biden administration, we seem to have this crisis that he created by going against all those executive orders. So he rescinded a lot of those. So we're here. We're not politicians. None of these folks are politicians. These are normal folks bringing attention to the problem. And so, yeah, there's a crisis here. You just have to hang out here in the afternoons and you'll see a lot of family units and adults walking around by themselves.
The opposite side would like to say that, you know, oh, these poor people and Trump kept them out and they were just sitting there waiting to come over. I'm like, at the end of the day, they're still illegal. They need to come over the right way, not just cross over. I'm sorry, but, you know, I have kids and my kids come first. And so this is as much of a big heart and a Christian person that I am. I love all people, but there's just a fine line of doing what's right and doing what's wrong. And these children are being sold into sex trafficking rings, child trafficking rings. We know that, but people are like oblivious and thinking, oh, they're just little poor kids and trying to find opportunity. They're being used by the cartels. We know that.
Well, Greg, you know, over the last few days, we've talked to law enforcement, we've talked to local residents, we've talked to a lot of people, and pretty much the agreement is there is definitely a crisis going on here. And the thing I find very interesting is even the locals here in Del Rio and a lot of these border towns, they all have Hispanic descent, but they believe in legal immigration because that's how many of them got here. So this illegal immigration thing is a big problem. It has not gone anywhere. It's not going to go anywhere until the Biden administration decides to do something about it, Greg.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's the thing we're pointing out. It was working, and it was getting under control in the last 4 years, and now the floodgates are wide open. Thank you, Tim.
Well, every night, the recently opened shelter at Our Lady of Guadalupe Church in Mission, Texas, fills up with nearly 100 migrants who have been allowed to remain in the United States as they apply for asylum refugee status.
You see a person who has no place to stay and nothing to eat, and they ask you if you could help them. You help them. And of course, Jesus himself said that. He said, you know, when you see somebody a stranger who's lost and needs help, and you help them, you're helping me.
These people are among the border crossers seeking refuge here as the Biden administration allows families with children under 7 years old immediate entry. After they arrive, Pastor Roy Snipes blesses them with holy water from the Rio Grande.
All right, thank you, Mike. I want to bring in the founder of wallbuilders.com, Victory News contributor David Barton. A lot of things there about what's happening on the border. I want to go back to a little bit about what the Reverend was saying there, and I appreciate the work he's doing taking care of people, but I hear this all the time when they hear news stories like this, that Jesus basically was a socialist. Help me understand.
Yeah, Jesus was not. It's interesting that when you look in the Bible, there are 4 different forms of government. There's self-government, there's family government, there's church government, and there's civil government. And when you look at verses in the Bible, you have to see to which entity are they talking. For example, when Jesus says, turn the other cheek, is he saying that to government? The answer is absolutely not, because we're told in Ecclesiastes that if government does not respond rapidly to lawbreakers, then other people are encouraged to become lawbreakers. When Jesus talks about forgiveness, is he speaking to government? He is not. He's speaking to us as individuals and families. And so oftentimes people just take whatever the verse in the Bible is and apply it to any jurisdiction, and that's clearly not the way the Bible intends it. It's interesting, though, in immigration, the Bible has a lot to say, and this is something that America has dealt with from the beginning. You look back to our very earliest years, America, everybody wanted to come here back then because the American Revolution occurred in what was called the Age of Revolution, the Helvetican Revolution, the Russian Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, all these different revolutions, and people were flooding in. So way back in 1790 and 1795, 1798, America created its first set of immigration laws. And it's interesting to see the biblical principles we use from a government standpoint in immigration, how closely they parallel Leviticus, And now we look at immigration, we no longer see it as a biblical issue, or when someone does use a Bible verse, it's really not in the context of what the government's supposed to do. Now, granted, we as individuals need to do everything we can, and we've been involved in the border in helping those down there with needs, not because we support illegal immigration, but because once they're here, you don't just turn your back. You've got to do something. But there's some policy issues that have to be decided here, and clearly the Biden administration has decided to reverse policy issues. And the problem is the result is we have a lot of problems on the border that we haven't had in a few years.
Okay, let me follow up on that because, and I know on Wall Builders, you go to the Wall Builders website, you'll find probably articles and things there about immigration in the early days. What is that biblical mandate for immigration that our founders followed? It's
interesting. In hearings that happened in Congress just a couple of years ago, so many from the religious left were using Leviticus 19:34, where the Bible says, look, when a stranger comes among you, you treat them like you would yourself, because remember, you were strangers in Egypt. And so they were saying, look, anybody that comes in from any place at any point in time, we've got to treat them like a citizen. They get all the rights, etc. And going back to Hebrew scholars who actually speak Hebrew, they said, no. There are 3 words for stranger in the Bible. And the word for stranger that's used there is the word that we would call proselyte. And it says, if anyone wants to become a proselyte among you, treat them like you would yourselves. So in other words, if they want to become a legal citizen and say, hey, we want to adopt your faith, your religion, your laws, we want to live by everything you've got, then say, okay, you treat them like a citizen. That would be like a legal immigrant. A legal immigrant coming in and say, okay, I've gone through the system, I've followed the laws, I've done exactly what's there, I'm learning the language, I'm learning the customs, I'm doing the education. Then you treat them exactly like a citizen, because they are. And so that's the word that's used in Hebrew. And a lot of times, as my rabbi tells me, he said English is the worst language in the Bible, worst language in the world to understand Hebrew, because there are so many more Hebrew words than there are English words. And so we take an English word that means 3 different Hebrew words, and we don't understand what the Bible says. And that's the problem of not going back to original intent of the Bible or the Constitution or history or anything else.
Well, you could call it a budget reconciliation abuse. For the 3rd time this year, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is poised to use this obscure procedure that allows Democrats to bypass the filibuster and push through Joe Biden's often radical agenda. And with budget reconciliation, it can be done without one Republican vote. The latest measure on the Chuck Schumer spending spree, an infrastructure plan costing up to $4 trillion. It's also expected to include a package of tax increases. Most pieces of legislation must clear a 60-vote Senate hurdle. According to Congressional Budget and Impoundment Control Act of 1974, reconciliation measures are only supposed to be used once per fiscal year. At least one fellow Republican has their sights set on Lisa Murkowski's Senate seat. On Monday, Kelly Chewbacca announced her plan to run for the Alaska Senate seat when it is up for re-election in 2022. Chewbacca resigned on Monday from the job she has held since 2019 as head of the Alaska Department of Administration. Murkowski is considered a moderate Republican, was one of 7 GOP senators who voted to convict Donald Trump for his actions on January 6th. The Alaska Republican Party voted to censure Murkowski for her vote against Donald Trump. Chewbacca has worked for the offices of the Inspector General for the U.S. Postal Service, Federal Trade Commission, and Department of Justice before joining Governor Mike Dunleavy's administration.
In the state. With so much ground to cover, let's go to Mike Garofalo with the top stories. Mike?
And Greg, President Joe Biden laid out his plan to invest in the country's infrastructure on Wednesday during a speech in Pittsburgh.
We have to move now, because I'm convinced that if we act now, in 50 years, people are going to look back and say, this was the moment that America won the future. What I'm proposing is a one-time capital investment of roughly $2 trillion in America's future, spread largely over 8 years. It will generate historic job growth, historic economic growth, help businesses to compete internationally, create more revenue as well.
Joe Biden's proposal would gut the core of former President Donald Trump's 2017 tax cuts. The corporate tax rate would jump to 28% from 21%, and a global minimum tax would be charged to prevent companies from avoiding taxes. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell of Kentucky called the plan a Trojan horse for tax hikes. Former President Donald Trump issued a statement about it. The bill saying the big winner would be China because the U.S. jobs would move overseas due to higher taxes.
Here left, David, I want to go to the Joe Biden tax plan. This president, in the short months that he's been there, has already racked up about $6 trillion in debt, an astounding rate. But people need to understand that corporations, correct me if I'm wrong, don't pay taxes. This is going to hurt employees and their raises. People aren't going to get hired. They're not going to get raises. Investors are going to suffer at this. Vendors for those corporations, the money's going to get passed down to us, is it not?
It already is being passed down to us. If you look just a year ago, the price of gasoline was almost $1 less than what it is now. That's because policy changes in canceling the Keystone Pipeline and what's being done with fossil fuels versus green energy. Just those changes have already caused that increase. We'll see it again if we're going to cancel student debts, if we're going to say that, well, you know, you agreed to a loan, but you don't have to pay it back. And by the way, if a reason for not paying back a loan is you didn't get the education you were promised, I think nearly every kid in the United States can get their money back on that one because they didn't get the education they were promised. We see statistically how bad it is. It's more indoctrination than it is education. Even from a faith perspective, we know that about 80% of kids that go to college renounce their faith while they're in college because they are so hostile there. We know, for example, for every one Republican history professor, there are 33 Democrat history professors. For every one journalism professor that's Republican, there are 20 Democrat journalism professors. So you're not getting the education you paid for. You're getting indoctrination, not education. But you're also going to see this even with what we saw with the COVID relief plan. Everybody's going to get $1,400. It is going to cost every family $69,000 to pay just for that one policy. Now, that doesn't count everything else that's coming. And Greg, as you pointed out, there is not a business in the United States that pays taxes. I've got several businesses. I don't pay taxes. Yeah, I do. But what I do is I pass that cost on to the consumer by raising the prices of my products. And so you're going to pay more for bread. You're going to pay more for gasoline. You're going to pay more for housing. You're going to pay more for everything because businesses can't stay in business if they don't make money. And to make money, they have to pass their business price increases onto the consumers. So this is going to hit the consumers in ways that we've never imagined and at a faster rate than we could have imagined.
Well, here we go. Susan Rice is back. After mostly operating behind the scenes in the Biden administration, she's about to get some face time. The former national security advisor in the Obama administration is best known for how she spun the cause of the deadly attack on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi, Libya in 2012. Do you remember that? While currently serving as assistant to the president for domestic policy, an executive order signed by the president earlier this month named Susan Rice as Joe Biden's point person on directing of 100 of federal agencies to expand mail-in voting. Mail-in voting was a key factor in Joe Biden's victory in 2020. All right, Chris Hall, we're going to have a mail-in voting czar. That's my word, not his. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. There's no better name for that, a mail-in ballot czar. This is incredible. I want to challenge someone to find for me the article, section, and clause in the U.S. Constitution that authorizes any federal authority over mail-in ballots, much less the president's authority to create a czar by executive order to operate under a power that's not even delegated. Now you've got Susan Rice doing this, who has proven to the American people that she is not a friend to the Constitution. She is not a preserver of the people's rights. But I think the point here is that she's proven to this administration that she will be loyal to the level of my terms, not Victory News, the loyal of immorality to the administration and to the destruction of the people's rights.
Wow. Interesting point. Thank you very much. The left's push to expand mail-in and absentee voting has some members of its own party now scratching their heads. Democrats, but most importantly, Senator Joe Manchin, have voiced major concerns about the expansive voting bill, otherwise known as the For the People Act. It's being pushed by the Biden administration. The For the People Act is over 800 pages long and contains reforms such as changes to campaign finance laws, changes to redistricting rules, automatic voter registration for everyone, ending gerrymandering, and giving felons the right to vote. But not all Democrats are on board with Senator Manchin, saying this bill may garner some short-term benefits, but will inevitably only exacerbate the distrust that millions of Americans harbor against the U.S. government. A big move today toward election integrity in the state of Arizona. The Republican-controlled Senate announced on Wednesday it will be auditing Maricopa County's 2020 election results, and all four firms have been hired. Four firms have been hired to conduct the audit of the results and the recount of the 2.1 million votes cast. Back on March 18th, the Senate announced it had ordered the audit, which will include testing voting machines, scanning ballots, looking for breaches, and performing a hand count. I want to bring in State Representative Mark Fincham from the state of Arizona. Mark, congratulations on getting that done. Can you give us any details on what you're looking for?
Well, I'm totally not a senator. I'm a representative. Thanks for correcting that. I'm not one of those who is in the decision loop for the action that the Senate took. So for operational security, there's been a blackout on a lot of information. The press release that came out Monday named the companies that have been tapped by the Senate president and the Judiciary chairman. I find it interesting, though, that this morning Dominion came out with a press release trashing everyone that the Senate chose for forensic audit, claiming that an audit isn't needed, that their software is trustworthy. Me thinks that they protest just a little too loudly. And now we have the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors yesterday called for an emergency meeting for legal advice. The time has passed for all of the shucking and jiving, and it's time for us to get to the work of a forensic audit so that we can begin to restore the confidence of Arizonans in this election.
So are the numbers, are they all still there, all the ballots? I mean, the forensic audit, we're looking at apples to apples here, aren't we? Is it all still there?
And the forensic audit is going to be broad and deep. So it's going to be the actual physical ballots. It's my understanding that they may also be taking a look at the ballot images. They're going to take a look at the equipment, the software, the interaction. I'm sure that they will probably even inspect the motherboards of those devices to verify whether or not there's a modem or any additional capabilities that somehow circumvent what the expectations of the machine were. I mean, all this time, Dominion has been saying, oh, there's no access to the internet. Forgive us, but we just no longer believe you.
Representative, sir, thank you so much for your insight and what's happening. I want you to keep us up to date on what's happening there with the recount and all of that. We believe that I want the truth to come out. And whatever that truth is, I'm okay with it.
That is the objective of the forensic audit. And what so many people have tried to inject into this is that somehow the Senate has a political agenda to disrupt or to overturn the election. Nothing could be further from the truth. The objective of the forensic audit is quite simple. We want to know, we want to be able to prove to the taxpayers, to the voters, that there were fraudulent activities or incompetence, either one, in our election in Maricopa County. Either prove it or disprove it. Because right now, both sides of the question, those who claim that there was, those who claim that there wasn't, neither one has proof. So the whole point is, let's collect the proof. Let's do it in an orderly manner. Now, I think it's very disturbing that Dominion came out with a statement earlier today or first thing last night, claiming that all the people who the Senate is hiring, all of them are biased. They shouldn't be there. There's nothing wrong with the election. Look, what makes elections strong is scrutiny. If they can't stand up to scrutiny, people should be very afraid.
That's absolutely right. You need to know what you're up against, and that's the only way you're going to fix it, is if you know what happened or did not happen.
Trust me, I would be delighted if there is nothing there and this entire thing has been an exercise in what not to do.
Amen.
If that's the case, great. We've learned something.
Yes, we did. Amen. You're absolutely right. And I'm looking forward to the results of what they're doing. And I'm thankful that they're doing it. And we ask the other states to join in and do what Arizona is doing and check it out. Representative Mark Fincham of Arizona, sir, we appreciate you. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask this privately. Those of you that love Representative Fincham, say a prayer for him and his family today. All right, Chris Ann, here we go. This is Greg's rant section. We got Hillary Clinton with the Benghazi. People died in this. She broke the law in the way she handled her emails and bleach bidding and smashing the devices. And a woman who goes to church who's pregnant and is not feeling well pulls her mask down and gets pulled out of church. This is why, Congress, people don't like you. The double standard. Chris Ann, where am I wrong?
You know, Hillary Clinton thing. This is another, the laws are for you, but not for me. Can I tell you, I am a U.S. Army veteran. I was in military intelligence. I know all the clearance qualifications. I know all the paperwork. I know for a fact that there are people in prison right now for violating the same laws in a lesser degree than Hillary Clinton. We have allowed Congress and our judiciary to create a political aristocracy, and nothing's going to change until the people get educated, organized, and activated.
Okay, so how do we do that, Chris Ann? How do we do that? How do we organize and educate?
Okay, so first comes the education part. We have lots of classes at libertyfirstuniversity.com. My husband and I travel across the country and teach classes. We have online resources. We have all of this stuff. So first step is education, because you've got to understand what the standard is. And then in that education, you organize people to get activated. But there is a plan. There is a way to do this. Our Constitution is in writing, and we have the power to control this. I mean, we don't have the liberty or the time to do that education right here, but I'm going to tell you unequivocally the education is available.
Yes.
The same thing goes with the lady at the church, Greg. The people of the church need to understand the Bible. That the body of the church is the governor over the leadership of the church, according to Matthew 18. And the people need to stand up with the courage of this young lady and take back control of their churches.
In all fairness, I want to make this known that the parish will not comment, cannot comment until they get direction from the diocese on that, and we understand that. I wonder, in my personal self, would they accept refugees coming in from the border? I just wondered that personally. Anyway.
Republican senators have asked for an intelligence records related to 3 Chinese individuals who reportedly have ties to the family of President Joe Biden. Chuck Grassley of Iowa and Ron Johnson of Wisconsin made the request in a letter sent Wednesday to the Director of National Intelligence as well as to the Attorney General. Now, according to Just the News, the letter calls out one of the individuals, Chi Ping Ho, for his arrest in 2017 for international bribery and money laundering offenses. Ho, who was later convicted, made his first call after his arrest reportedly to Joe Biden's brother, James. The letter also called out the president's son, Hunter, for at one point representing Patrick Ho, receiving at least $1 million payment for that.
Lawmakers in Tennessee are well on their way to making the Bible the official state book of Tennessee. A resolution calling for such a move passed the State House of Representatives on Tuesday is now before the state Senate. According to the ChristianHeadlines.com, the resolution, which passed 55-28, says the Bible has had a significant impact on the state's economy and aided in maintaining vital records. Mark, again from Wall Builders, I want to cover that with you. Before we do, if we could, I'd like to go back to that Joe Biden wants to put masks back on everyone. And the thing that frightens me the most is showing proof of vaccination. That seems like it's a violation of HIPAA rights that we have with our medical records. And it kind of sounds like, show me your papers.
Well, there's several problems with it. He says it's not politics, but it is. You look at where the states are unmasked, and they're pretty red. And you look at where the states are masked, and they're pretty blue. And by the way, I saw a chart this morning, very significant. The masked states tend to be the ones that are still keeping the businesses shut down. The unmasked states are the ones that open businesses up. And so you see very low unemployment in the red states right now. You see very high unemployment. When you look at the top 10 states on each side, pretty red, pretty blue. So despite what he claims it is about politics, it shouldn't be. It should be about science. We saw even this week, there's a great piece that came out in Colorado by a number of pastors there who said, look, the stats are really clear. Governor Polis, it is 0.1% who die from COVID. 0.1%. That's a lot lower than traffic accidents or other accidental deaths. And it's only 0.3% that are hospitalized. And you're keeping the state shut down. And what that's doing for suicides, what that's doing for unemployment, what's that doing for the other things, it's a problem. So it is a political thing, and that's unfortunate what's happening with COVID. Greg, you mentioned the stuff with the mandatory vaccinations. It's interesting that the Council of Europe, which is kind of the counterpart for the EU, they got 47 member nations. They said, look, we are absolutely opposed to mandatory vaccinations, and we're absolutely opposed to punishing people who don't have vaccinations. So it's strange that in Europe, they're actually taking a much more, if you will, moderate position than what we're taking in the United States from the liberal side. Europe is considered a lot more progressive, a lot more liberal, and even they're saying, hey, this is crazy. Mandatory vaccinations, that's not a good deal, and punishing people who don't have vaccinations, that's not a good deal. And it does have a problem with HIPAA rights, not to mention constitutional rights, rights of conscience, so many other things. And the legislation we see moving forward right now does not even have exclusion for rights of conscience. And there's a lot of parents who don't do vaccines of any kind for conscience. There's several religious faiths that don't do vaccinations, and they're not even getting exclusions in this new legislation.
Right. I think the Europeans remember people asking to see papers to enter and exit our place. That's all I'll say about that. We have an interview tomorrow morning, or have a scheduled interview tomorrow morning with a woman who was pulled out of her church recently here in the Dallas area for not having her mask pulled up. Let's imagine you're going to church with your 1-year-old while you're pregnant, and you're not feeling so great, maybe a little lightheaded, so you decide to, you have your mask on, but you pull your mask down for a moment. In order to protect others, you social distance, you sit at least 15 feet from other churchgoers. Then after taking part in the communion with the Eucharist still on your tongue, police officers approach you and tell you to come with them or they will arrest you. Well, that's exactly what happened to a mom from Dallas, Texas, Deidre Harrison, in mid-March while attending Mass at Holy Trinity Catholic Church. Now, in all fairness, the parish there, Holy Trinity, will not comment until they have direction from the diocese on that, and I understand that. Deidre, welcome. We have that mom with us today. Here she is, Deidre Harrison. Welcome to Victory News. Is she there? Do we have that?
Can you hear me?
There, I got you. Welcome. Welcome to Victory News. I'm so sorry this happened to you. Tell us a little bit about what happened on that day in church.
Yes. So I was at Mass, like I said, with my husband and my 1-year-old daughter. And I'm newly pregnant and was feeling lightheaded and nauseous. And so I removed my mask. And next thing I know, the pastor had called the police to have me arrested. And so, I went to go, before the police had arrived, I was able to go receive communion. I'm kneeling down, praying, holding my daughter. I have the Eucharist on my tongue. I'm in prayer. And one of the police officers grabs my arm and she tells me, you need to leave with me right now or you're going to get arrested. And I said, did I commit a crime? And she said, you're trespassing. This is a business and the business does not want you here.
Okay. So
we complied. Yeah.
And so you complied. You did not get arrested though.
I did not get arrested. I would have been had we not complied and left with her right then and there. So we did.
Okay, so I'm thinking, I'm sorry, if the police come in and you're there receiving communion and they come in and they grab you, that everybody else in the congregation that day, everybody else that's there is going to take notice of this. Did it create a disturbance? What happened?
You would think so. I would hope so. But unfortunately, not one person in the church honestly even flinched at what was occurring. And I would think, honestly, almost out of pure curiosity, or dare I say nosiness of what was going on. I mean, here's this mom holding her daughter, kneeling in prayer with 3 police officers, you know, trying to escort her out, potentially put her in handcuffs. And not one person said a word, almost even looked over, took a picture, nothing. It was very upsetting.
Yeah, I imagine so. So you weren't arrested. What happened after you got outside with them?
Right. So we immediately comply. We leave with the police officer. But I did tell her, she kept saying this. I said, how are we committing a crime? Why do I have to leave? And she kept saying we were trespassing, that this was a business, to which I responded, this isn't a business. This isn't McDonald's. This is a sanctuary. This is a place of worship. And I don't see how I could possibly be trespassing, because the masks have been, our governor has lifted the mask mandate.
Right.
Our bishop has yet to declare masks being required or not. He's only stated, and these are his specific words, that they are expected. Well, expected is a very vague word. And so the pastor did not have the jurisdiction to call the police to have me.
So how do you know that the pastor's the one that did that? Do you know that?
Yes, he personally came up to me in the middle of mass and told me he was going to call the police.
Okay, and you mentioned to him you weren't feeling well, you're pregnant, and all of that, but that didn't matter.
He didn't give me the opportunity at all. There was no time for that. He just came up and said, "Put your mask on," and I didn't even have a chance to really say anything. And then I said, "I'm not leaving," and then he immediately said, "I'm calling the police," and stormed off.
Okay, I'm going to read to our viewers here what the governor said at the beginning of March. Today, I'm issuing a new executive order. All businesses of any type are allowed to open 100%. Also ending the statewide mask mandate. He says, under no circumstance can a county judge put anybody in jail for not following COVID orders, and no penalties can be imposed for failing to wear a mask. But that didn't seem to apply to your congregation, your parish. I'm sorry that happened.
Yes, clearly not, and it's outrageous that this occurred. I was socially distanced, and I think this goes back to the fact that this is not about health. It was never about health. It's about control. It's about obedience.
You're right.
And when the pastor saw that I wasn't immediately obeying him, he just goes from 0 to 100, and that's ultimately what this is about.
Now, Chris-Ann Hall, I want to bring you in on this from a constitutional side of this. I know the church has a right to remove people if they so desire, but your thoughts?
Well, let's be clear. The church absolutely has a private property right here, and that's something that we cannot allow government to intrude upon. The problem becomes in the application, right? So the governor's order that you can't be arrested for not wearing a mask or sanctioned for not following COVID violations is not what happened here. When the pastor said you have to wear a mask or go, and then there is a refusal, then that invokes the private property rights. The problem becomes, this is not a business, this is a church, which doesn't avoid the private property issues. The churches absolutely have to retain their authority to have control over who is there and who is not. But when we are talking about churches, is there not a spiritual and a moral obligation to deal with people in grace, to deal with people in accommodation? And when you have a young lady, why not engage in conversation with her? This is not something that should be dealt with in a spirit of absolutism and a spirit of fear. And I think that's what we're seeing with here. As she said, this is about control. This is about a people who have become absolutely saturated with a spirit of fear and lost a sense of grace. And we as a people need to understand that our churches have to be a place where people can feel that grace. Yeah. And it's a place of healing. It's a place of recovery. Right. And so we have to be people who take our feet to a church that's not going to be a dictatorship like this and still preserve the private property rights of the church.
Deidre, what's next? What happens now?
So we're contemplating what to do, but I think this is happening a lot more throughout the country than we realize. And so I hate for this incident to set precedent for what is acceptable. And I think the church, we are the laity. The laity is the church, and we need to make sure that we stand up against what's happening and make sure this doesn't happen again.
You're so right. And thank you so much for sharing your story today. I want to remind people what the governor of Texas did say. And no penalties can be imposed for failing to wear a mask. No penalties whatsoever. I was trying to think if this has ever happened before in the life of Jesus Christ, and we found it. John chapter 9, verse 22 says his parents said these things because they feared the Jews, for the Jews had agreed already that if anybody confessed that he was Christ, he should be put out of the synagogue. And now we've made it about masks rather than confessing Christ. Deidre Harrison, thank you so much for your story and your courage. There are a lot of people that are praying for you. Congratulations on the new child, and thank you for sharing this today on Victory.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so very much. Thanks for joining us today. We will be back tomorrow, noon Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Central. Make sure you join us then. Don't miss Flashpoint. Gene Bailey told me it's going to be awesome. You don't want to miss it. We'll see you later. Have a great afternoon and a great evening. Bye-bye.